forced the state administration to put up warnings for people not to let their cattle graze where BT crop was sown.
The intestines of these animals which died after eating BT cotton plants were shriveled, which means that the food that they ate was not digested, and that could be because the microorganisms that digest the food, like grass, which are present in the rumen of these cattle, simply died on account of BT toxin.
If you think that the problem caused by BT cotton will be confined to farmers and the animals only, you need to think again. Because the gene that is used in BT cotton is the same which is now being used in BT brinjal. Naturally, the people are outraged and they are out in the street to register their protest.
इस देश में नहीं घुसने देंगे। ये कार्रवाई हमारी उस लड़ाई की घोषणा है।
ये जेनेटिकली मॉडिफाइड बीज का किसानों द्वारा विरोध किया जा रहा है।
If we die tomorrow, if we get cancer, it's not just cancer that we'll get, it'll be passed on to our children. This is a question of our lives and it's no joke.
BT brinjal could be a catastrophe. It's got an antibiotic-resistant marker gene in there which could potentially create super diseases untreatable with antibiotics. It's got a BT gene in there which might turn our intestinal bacteria into living pesticide factories, and BT has already shown to cause allergic reactions and toxic reactions.
The tests that need to be done have just not been done on BT brinjal. There is a very strong critique of it from people outside the country whose credibility is not in doubt, and we ourselves have examined the data, the so-called safety data, and it's full of flaws.
If you were to keep in a glass pane, a glass box, one BT brinjal, and you will put some insects into that, you will see, in a day or two, all those insects dying. Imagine when you eat that BT brinjal, what will happen to your body?
This comes from California. This is from the USA. Lychee from Thailand.
The Indian government often claims that it has not allowed any GM food for human consumption in the country. But if reports about nearly 70% US food having GM contents are true, and so many US food items are entering the country, how can we say with certainty that we are not already eating GM food?
We have conclusively proved that we are already eating genetically modified foods. These are Doritos corn chips which are being made by PepsiCo International and is being illegally imported and being sold in the markets of this country. In May 2008, when we tested these in the German labs, we found out that these contain genetically modified corn varieties which have the potential to cause kidney and liver damages, because of which most of the European countries have banned these GM corn varieties. What's most disturbing is the fact that even after 8 months, after alerting the Health Ministry and the GAC, no steps have been taken, and these Doritos corn chips are still being sold in the markets of this country.
Doritos are not the only brand that contains genetically engineered ingredients in India. I'm at the Khan market in Delhi. Let's take a look at other brands that contain genetically engineered ingredients. So this is from the United States. It contains ingredients that are from soy or corn, and therefore you can assume that unless it says organic, it's genetically engineered. Canola is genetically engineered, both in the United States and Canada. It's got corn syrup, cottonseed oil, soybean oil. It also has cornstarch. All that's from genetically engineered foods. It's actually not legal to be importing these products into India, but there's no enforcement.
The Genetic Engineering Approval Committee, GEAC, since its inception never bothered to issue guidelines regarding the regulation of imports of GM food products, and has proved toothless in preventing the GM contaminated foodstuff flooding supermarkets across the country.
Genetic Engineering Approval Committee is more or less a rubber stamp for the industry. That's the way it has behaved all over the years. Now, interestingly, if we were to just make one clause, introduce one clause, that if something goes wrong with the genetically modified foods, the chairman of GEAC should be put behind bars, you will see everything will stop.
While we are not in a position to say with certainty if the food sold at US food chains in India is safe for consumption, but when we contacted them for the truth about their food, they refuse to come in front of the camera. The biggest argument of the proponents of GM food is that it is being sold in the US for nearly 2 decades, and people there have been eating it and not dying from it. So why is there so much hue and cry in the other countries?
It's a fascinating biotechnology argument to suggest that because the United States is using it and their consumers are using it, that it must be safe for the rest of the world. I mean, it took the United States about 500 years to realize that tobacco was dangerous. To suggest again that the United States is a country where we can trust their judgment to be a beacon or a guardian for the rest of us around the world is really a dangerous assumption.
GM foods were introduced in 1996. Between 1994 and 2001, there was a doubling of food-related illnesses. 5 years after GM soy was introduced, peanut allergies doubled, which might be related to the introduction of GM soy. So no one can say that everyone in America is healthy, and no one can say that GMOs are not part of the problem. The average American, if you ask them, have you ever eaten a GM food in your life? 60% say no. 15% say I don't know. So 3/4 of America do not realize that they eat GM ingredients in almost every meal.
As food crisis worsens, farmers push GM seeds. Switzerland extends moratorium on GM crops till 2013. French Parliament rejects bill to allow GM crops. Italy, Greece, Austria, Poland ban GM crops. Western Australia extends moratorium on GM crops. Scientists warn against GM foods. Genetically engineered foods pose health risks for children. Prince Charles says GMO crop will be a disaster. India is not a guinea pig for beefy brinjal.
All the kinds of disasters that we talk about, rather right from Hiroshima to Chernobyl to 9/11 to 26/11, whatever you call it, will pale in front of the disaster that is awaiting us in case of food.
There's only one definite outcome of genetic engineering of food: the end of choice. The question is, as a consumer, what should you do?
First of all is educate people about the harmful effects of genetically modified food. Second is gather momentum for this movement and educate also the bureaucrats. Expose all those people who are trying to make money out of producing poison in the name of food. Third is satyagraha.
What we should do is, and what the public should ask for, the consumer should ask for, is a moratorium on release of any GM crop, sale of any GM seed for a period of 5 to 7 years, during which an appropriate risk assessment system should be set up.
It is now your time to stand up and be counted. Let me tell you, if you as a consumer stand up and exercise your voice that this is not the kind of food that you want, I can tell you all these companies will go away.
As dusk falls and traffic starts thinning on the road, it's time for Sunita to go home and look forward to a well-deserved meal with her family. She may be unmindful about the safety of the food that she and her family eat, but how can we, the educated lot, leave the safety of something as vital as food to be decided by those whose sole aim is to earn profit? We have to ensure that our bodies are not enslaved by these corrupt and criminal multinationals. And we will have to force our government to put a complete ban on the production and distribution of GM food in India till its safety is not assured through extensive and impartial trials. After all, what is at stake here is our own health and our very survival.